Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host Bryan. We're going to continue on with this week's theme of melodic bass lines, checking out songs that feature bass lines that are melodic. It's pretty self-explanatory. You know what you're getting into when you see it on the tin. Let's dive into some Muse. It's typically a pretty good band for bass ideas. We're going to be checking out the song Hyper Music off of the Origin of Symmetry album. Let's kick it. Alright, got the bass lining up with the guitar. Yeah, very cool. The bass drives. It drives that feeling of being stuck there after so much movement. The vocal oohing in the background is haunting. Can't say I've ever heard Muse do that before. Oh, I like the new guitar idea over here. We didn't have that last verse. That's all pick scraping too, isn't it? Get those very screechy guitar tones. So coming back to this idea with some new dissonant harmony on it. A return back to form. Well, not the hyperiest of music, but I suppose it came out before hyper pop, so can't really compare the two. No, I'm kidding. This song has a ton of energy to it, right? I think that's pretty evident. Uh, let's just kick it off with the verse, right? So we have this climbing bass line that I really liked because, like I said, it has all this energy to it, right? It's operating within the same uh, note intervals. So we have a root note. I don't know if it is necessarily the root note of the chord, but it is our starting note for each group, and then the interval above that, which I think was a fifth, but I could be wrong. And so you go bum 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 bum, and then you'd go up and you pick a new group of notes, but it would be the same distance between them. So it is a melodic idea for sure. I'm not going to take that away from it, but it's also one idea that just gets transposed up and down a scale. But what I really liked about it was we have this idea and we rise up, we keep having this escalating tension to the track, and then we reach a peak and come down a little bit and just lean into that. And it's a tenser sound. It's certainly a leading tone. It feels like it's ready to go to the next sound, and it just doesn't, and it stays there. And then it finally leans into where it wants to go, and that acts as a leading tone to a repetition of the entire phrase. I thought it was masterfully done. Muse is just great at building tension anyways. This is something I expect from them as a band, and I really like this implementation of them doing that. What's also cool is that the guitar lines up with a lot of what the bass is doing. They're playing very similar licks here, and so we have both a bit of an octave layering here where the guitar and bass are in two different octaves but still playing the same notes. So we don't get any direct harmony from that, but we do get different pitches within the idea. But beyond that, we also have the vocals, right? So we have this melody that's going on above everything. I don't really care about that right now. There's these ooh, these little oohs sitting around behind everything. And at first I didn't even notice them. They're sort of invisible. They hide, they shy away from the spotlight as often as they can, but it's impossible not to feel them. The song would be very empty without them. I'm curious how many people didn't even notice they were there until I mentioned it. It took me a while, so but it's just very cool because it adds this extra layer of tension harmonically. It's not necessarily the fact that it's vocals, it's not the timbre of the vocals, it's just the notes. They just happen to be delivered by the voice. Um, and they add just a little bit of extra tension to everything. And there's a warble to them, which I don't think is an intonation warble. It just sounds like a very tight, quick vibrato, which is kind of impressive. Um, it sounds like the kind of vibrato you would get if you push your vocal cords to their limits, and it would be completely unintentional. It's just that there's so much strain put on your vocal cords, and like you shouldn't really be trying to hit this note at all. But it's just impossible for you to hold that note clearly and cleanly. Your vocal cords under such stress, it introduces a very rapid vibrato to it all. I don't think that's what's happening. It's a very comfortable range for the vocalist. I've heard him sing higher. It doesn't sound like there's any stress put into it, which makes it think that which makes me think it's a voluntary, really quick vibrato. It's just wild. It sounds, uh, I don't know. It's not a very musical vibrato, which I think is also what ties into all of this. It creates a very unique sound in totality of it all. That adds a little bit of a haunting element on top of all the stress and anxiety that the music's already creating within the track. It's just a masterfully created verse. Speaking of tension and anxiety and stress, this album cover gives me tension. It gives me stress and anxiety. It's, I don't know what it is. It's a bunch of tuning forks, as far as I can tell. Maybe very narrow American football field goals. It's called Origin of Symmetry, and these objects are fairly symmetrical, but without having a wider view of the area, it's not a symmetrical picture. The vertical slice that we get of this landscape is not one of symmetry. What does that imply? I don't know, but it stresses me out to look at it, especially with the idea of this being the origin of symmetry. But also, I think there's something else that ties into this, and I think all the tracks that we've listened to from this song, what was that? Space Dementia? That title sounds familiar. Megalomania, I think we've done. And now Hyper Music. So I guess 3 of the 12 tracks we've checked out on this album are all densely tense and anxious and haunting even at times. I have these emotions, I think, tied to this album art. I don't know if I necessarily felt anxious when I looked at it the first time, but I certainly do now. When I see that we're listening to a track off this album, I immediately think, oh boy, this is going to be one of those tense tracks. There's something haunting about the music I've listened to from this album, and this song lines up with my idea of what this album is. Now, maybe one day I'll go ahead and listen to the whole album and I'll be like, oh, I was just given a selection of it. But I fully believe if I check this album out, I'm going to come out the other side a mess, just shaking, having been pushed to my my limits, my nerves, uh, for an hour long. But the thing is it's cool. I don't know what it is about Muse. They find a way to make stress cool. Their songs are so stressful. They're so full of tension. You just kind of want to bundle up when you listen to stuff from Muse, particularly from this album. And but it always works. That's the thing I don't get. Like I enjoy listening to it. This is an album I want to listen to. I just haven't gotten around to. But it's not one that I would normally seek out, especially on an emotional level. Now we have a pre-chorus in here that's just kind of bonkers. It's four really short staccato notes, bop 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 bop, and there's some natural compression put on the vocals. They feel very punky, almost shouted. Not something I've ever heard Muse do before. It kind of caught me off guard the first time, and I think I chuckled about it. It was an absurd idea. Just one of those things that I think I use this metaphor too often, but like watching a cat bark. It's not something you expect to hear, and I just don't have an image of Muse being punkier like this. So that caught me off guard. And then the chorus expands on many of the ideas that we saw in the verse, just kind of amplified to the next level, while also reaching a homogeneity of sounds. We don't have an escalating tension in the bass, it's all relatively in the same area, just a repeated lick over and over and over without that note change to it. The guitar follows suit. The vocals are just as haunting. We still have the ooze going on in the background. The second time through the chorus, we get a nice little bluesy guitar idea for a moment. I think it showed up for a couple of bars, and that was that. And that's pretty much the whole song there. We have the outro, which revisits one of the heavier guitar riffs and introduce. Oh no, it's our intro riff. Bum 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 bum. But the second note, that I believe is a fifth above the first, leads into tension and dissonance. I think it's a dyad actually that's played there that creates just a ton of tension between the two notes, but also it's very unstable compared to our first note, which just adds to that tension of it. We do that for one repetition through and then return back down to the consonant harmony on that second note, and that wraps the track up. It is really verse, chorus. That is it. We have an intro and an outro. They're pretty much the same thing with slight variation on them, but it's also just the chorus, I think, without words on it. So, yeah, I don't know that I have much else to say about this one. It's kind of funky, it's heavy, it's just tense all throughout. It is an emotionally dense track that just, I don't know why I like these songs from Muse. I don't like these songs when anyone else does it. It's got to be something about the fun bass lines and the unique vocal ideas. I don't know. Speaking about vocals, let's hit some lyrics. I don't quite get this, even with the annotations, which someone really liked this song because every single line is annotated. I do like how it says instrumental intro for the very first section. It says this is repeated in the background of the chorus as well. I like little notes like that. I don't know if people reading lyrics really care about that, but it's something I picked up. I think it's important to talk about the structure of the song and what elements are callbacks or references to others. Sometimes an intro is just an intro, but sometimes the intro is also just another part of the song without lyrics put on it. What does that mean? So I like how that information is placed here. It's not done. It's done very rarely. I'll put it that way. The chorus says, "You know that I don't want you, and I never did. I don't want you, and I never will." The annotation suggests that this is a breakup song. I kind of find it hard to read it from that perspective. The verse 1 says, "Your golden lies feed my role in this forgotten space race under my control. Who's returned from the dead? Who remains?" Verse 2 says, "You wanted more than I was worth, and you think I was scared, and you needed proof. Who really cares anymore? Who restrains?" I don't get it. There is one line I've omitted. It is that really quick staccato idea just before the chorus. It says, "just to spit in your face." There is obviously a lot of disdain towards this other person from the character, the vocalist, the narrator, whoever. And that anger, that disdain, that hatred is fueled by what seems to have been a negative relationship. The song starts off with, "Your golden lies feed my role." So he feels like he wasn't treated with respect. Maybe it is a breakup song. I don't know. It feels, well, honestly, it's a bit underdeveloped. There's like a whole 12 lines here, and I feel like it's a bit vague. The annotation for the chorus, "I don't love you, and I never did, and I never will." The annotator believes that this is done sarcastically as a way to lie to himself. He did love this person, but he has to tell himself this now, since they've come back. Maybe that's what the idea of coming back from the dead. Who's returned from the dead, right? Maybe you came back. You want to reignite this relationship, but I don't love you and I never did. I don't know if I believe that though. It's primarily because the rest of the text doesn't support that. Maybe there is a duality. Maybe he has to tell this other person that he doesn't love them, even though he does and he wants to get back together, but he knows that it won't work. But the text is so limited that I find that would be an extrapolation of what's presented in the text and would be an injection of the reader, their perspective on it. Which is, it's fine, it's accurate. I don't mind if anyone has their own takes on things. A lot of the ways we interact with art, whether it's music, visual, or textual, is through our relationships with our own lives, bringing our own biases and experiences to the art. I think that every read, as long as it can be supported somewhat, is a valid read. I don't get that gist. And so there's a clashing of ideas here that I can't seem to reconcile. I don't know. None of this really fits with the vibe I got from the music, though. And Muse is pretty good about thematic cohesion, so there's got to be something I'm just missing here. So I extend this out to all of you. Those are my thoughts on Muse's hyper music, but what are your thoughts? Is there anything that stood out to you? Anything you'd like to add on to what I said or correct me on? Maybe you just have your own thoughts, opinions, and perspectives on this track. Put that stuff down in the comment section. Above that, in the description box, you'll find a link to Linktree. Takes you here. You can find my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. That wraps it up for this, but we do have a special selection coming up next. Otherwise, I'll be back tomorrow. 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC as usual. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening. whenever you choose to watch my videos.